Hey everyone, so a few days ago I made a video about a friend of mine by the name of Lex putting out a video about her experience with SuperMega and two of their employees, including a sexual assault that took place at Matt Watson's house. I would watch that video first if you haven't, or else this one's not going to really make that much sense. Again, this is going to be a video that's not the normal kind of stuff we talk about, but I did talk about on Saturday how I was going to make a follow-up to this video, and I want to stick to my word. So let's talk about it. Since my last video, a response from SuperMega and one of their employees has come out, and the public perception of this story is much different than it was a couple days ago. Not only that, but my personal coverage of the story has caused Matt and several of his fans to say false things about me. So I want to clear up some questions and comments that have been thrown my way and try to address them in a way that I personally think is fair. One of the reasons I wanted to make this video is that on Matt Watson's response video, he claimed that close friends of Leighton were suddenly using Lex's video to capitalize off of her story.
A lot of people, mainly Leighton and his close friends, have used this as an opportunity to capitalize off of what was initially someone's story of sexual assault. It seems like the story lost its plot and quickly devolved into a dogpile on me and Ryan.
And because of this, I want to be clear about why I made this video. I said it in the first video, and I'll say it again. I wanted Lex's story to be told. That's my priority. I was never once told by Leighton to make a video in any of the situation. I've had zero contact with him. I am not a close friend of Leighton's. I've only hung out with him a couple of times, and it was always in a social setting. And when Lex was preparing her story, I was given permission by her to cover it. It was never something that I suggested to Lex, but when she mentioned it, I decided to share her story because she's a friend of mine. I'm not trying to capitalize off of my friend's sexual assault. I never monetize videos like these, and I don't believe that these videos are posed as like great advertisements for my channel. I do not have a secret agenda to my videos. I own 100% of my channel, and I have zero employees who affect my posts. Covering serious stories is not something I enjoy doing, and when Matt insinuates that I was just told by his ex merch designer to make this video about SuperMega, I can't help but feel like he's also trying to discredit other stories that I've told in the past. The stress of like talking publicly about the pain that a friend of mine feels, especially when so many people are discounting her story, it's not a fun thing to do. I'm not like having a great time over here spending 2 videos in a week trying to talk about the shit that they did. My intention with this video was only to tell Lex's story, and I will say, I do have some issues with the way I covered the story on Saturday. I do regret taking focus away from Lex's story to add context that I initially thought was necessary, but in hindsight, I regret including it, and I wish to correct that in today's video. Regardless, I find it pretty disgusting that Matt would spend 45 minutes trying to show how unfair this treatment has been for him, but then he claims without any evidence that I just made my video because his disgruntled ex-employee told me to. Does Matt think that that's all it takes to get me to make a video about something? I know it's easy to just throw shit up when your channel's not doing great and you only really want to post American Truck Simulator Let's Plays, but I have a real job with a real schedule that I keep up for my audience, and I don't make videos for personal vendettas. I don't see how in this situation I am possibly capitalizing off of a victim's story. I think Matt does make a lot of interesting points in his apology that we will talk about today. But I think that this claim that he kind of ends his response with is extremely in bad faith, and it makes me question his true intentions with all of the claims he's making. But why don't we continue? That's towards the end of his response. I want to reverse back to where we were before. Since my last video, 3 videos from SuperMega have come out, and it has changed the way that people are viewing the initial story in a pretty big way. On the subreddit, we went from posts about Matt being a rape apologist and getting punched in the face, and then suddenly we have posts that say things like, I think people went way too far, and Matt and Ryan didn't deserve a lot of the hate they received. And on Lex's video, we suddenly have countless hateful comments that suddenly have mass amounts of likes, accusing her of lying, ruining SuperMega's career for no reason, and it all comes off as pretty gross. I think when the video initially happened, there were a lot of close fans of Super Mega who felt betrayed and hurt, and there were a lot of people who kind of did want to support them along the way, but kind of just stayed a little bit more quiet because of what was going on. But the moment that they both made their apologies, it seems like all these people came out of the woodworks and didn't just talk about exactly what Matt said, didn't just convey his points in a mature way, but there's a lot of people who have immediately turned around and claimed that Lex has lied about the whole thing, which makes me wonder if they even watched the response video in the first place. You'd think based off of a lot of these comments that Super Mega has completely resolved themselves and maybe some crazy shit happened and Lex devised an evil plan to cancel Super Mega, but surprise, it's a lot more nuanced than that. I don't know why people think that victims always want to just be like super villains, and that's like that's their only goal. Like they're not actual damaged and hurt people on the inside. And that's not me excusing some of the things we're going to talk about in this video, but I do think people were a little bit too quick to come out and support Matt and Ryan just because they agreed that they were pieces of shit in some of these circumstances. So my plan for this video is to touch on each response separately in chronological order to how they released, and then I want to talk about how I could have done better in my coverage of the story, as well as what I think about their stories and where we can conclude with a lot of this. I do want to know your guys' honest thoughts in the comments. I please ask you to respond in a mature way after watching the entire video. If you do want to watch any of the videos we talk about, I'm going to put them in the links down below. I think it is helpful context to hear everything everyone has to say. Okay, so pretty soon after I posted my video on Saturday, Jim, the producer slash employee of Super Mega who kissed Lex in the story from the original video, he came out with an apology. This apology came in a tweet that he tweeted out that included a link to an unlisted video. So already a very weird look when trying to apologize by making your video unlisted. So you need a link to see it and you can't search it up anywhere. Of course, I'm going to include, I'll include the original link, I guess, in the description if you want to see it. But obviously what Jim did was embarrassing and he should feel awkward about it. But let's give a brief overview of his apology.
About a year ago, as mentioned in your video, July 4th, 2022, I made her feel extremely uncomfortable with my actions.
Jim starts this video by saying, apologizing for making Lex feel uncomfortable, and comes up with a interesting point, saying that he was sexually assaulted when he was younger, and once he heard about this, he was so hurt because he said, if I made Lex feel the way that I felt when I was sexually assaulted, then I'm truly sorry.
For that, I take full responsibility for that. In college, at a party, I was raped by a man, and that's something that will sit with me for the rest of my life. If I ever made Lex feel a tiny bit like how I felt that morning after, I'm never gonna, I won't ever fucking forgive myself.
It does come off, and a lot of people would agree that it was a little bit out of nowhere. I mean, obviously it's related to the incident, but when you're the person making someone else uncomfortable, I think it's more important for the apology to come first. A lot of people kind of noted this in the comments of the public one, saying that it took him a minute and 25 seconds to make this about himself. Jim's too much of a coward to keep this up himself. Very sorry I got caught energy. There were also moments where Jim was, I guess, crying in the video, or like trying to seem like he's crying, but it was, I don't know, it's very odd.
I distinctly remember, like, so cringe. I distinctly remember saying, how hard is it to ask for consent? All you have to do is say, can I have a kiss? And then I said, can I have a kiss? And she said, yes. But it doesn't fucking matter.
Correct. I just thought that was kind of mainly what we needed to hear. Jim kind of gets into a lot of stuff that Leighton said on his stream, which is kind of a big point in today's video. It's something that everything kind of revolves around when it comes to Super Mega's apology. The one thing besides Lex that stays consistent is that Leighton had a piece in all of this. Jim explains that Leighton said on his stream that Jim was aroused by Lex's story that she told him, her sexual assault story. he explains that Jim must have been aroused by this. And yeah, it was completely irrelevant to Lex's story. Jim brings this up to say that it was personally very triggering to him because it put him back in the shoes of his own assault. Now, I don't think this is something Leighton knew about, so I don't think it's necessary to bring this up in a scenario where you're specifically apologizing about something you did to a woman who's not Leighton. But when you're apologizing about something you did and you bring up constantly that you feel awful about it because it was something you used to experience, it does kind of feel like you're taking some of the blame off yourself because of trauma that you experienced. And if I was Lex, I think this would be a hard apology for me to accept. Jim goes on to be pretty upset at a lot of the things Leighton said. And, you know, we will continue to talk about it, but I do think that, you know, the way Leighton handled that specific instance was out of hand. I do think that he should have handled that completely separate from this apology, especially because the apology's unlisted and everyone's watching it through these links. It just felt like he kind of freaked out and had to get it out there. The apology wasn't super well received. It was posted publicly. Most people are clowning on him, and the super mega audience is not being super forgiving about it. Most people think it was pretty lame. But around the same time, a series of screenshots from the Instagram close friends story of Matt's current girlfriend were posted on the subreddit. She posted shit on her close friends. Someone was a snake. They put it on the subreddit. I don't think that Matt's current girlfriend should be a part of the story anymore. I'm not going to say her name, and I regret bringing her up initially, but I do think that these stories actually give us necessary context to how Super Mega was handling this controversy behind closed doors before it happened. And this was before Matt or Ryan responded. I think it was around the same time Jim posted his apology, but it left a lot of people with a weird taste in their mouth. She tweets on her private Twitter, "Dude, just know people are fucking lying about me like crazy, and the only reason I haven't said anything is because Matt and my friends told me not to, because Matt is going to take care of it and tell everyone the truth in his response, debunking everything." Yeah, he told her not to say anything, and she did say something, and it got out. I don't understand how they could be worse at handling controversies, because it's very obvious what Matt's attitude about this is in this whole thing. And we'll learn a lot more in his apology. I mean, of course, he has some reasons to feel upset about the way people are talking about his magnum opus. But, you know, another tweet about the whole thing. "This whole thing has been so fucking ridiculously unfair to everyone involved and blatantly false. I know I'm not supposed to be saying anything, but I hope everyone feels like idiots when they see the receipts." Okay, I guess none of this is on her Instagram close friends. I don't know why I said that initially, but she posted something that says, "Taking every ounce of self-control, but period, I'll let him explain." And then posted a reaction image that says, "Whatever you hear about me, please believe it. I no longer have time to explain myself. You can also add some if you want." Overall, you can tell that she is not happy about it. And I can come to a conclusion about how Matt feels about it. But that is all stuff that was behind closed doors. We don't have any proof for that. So that brings us to Monday, when we get a response from Matt and Ryan. We get two separate videos from Matt and Ryan. We have one that says my response Matt, one says my response Ryan. Matt's video is 48 minutes. Ryan's video is 9 minutes. In the time since, Super Mega has fallen from 1 million subscribers down to 954,000. And this video was posted the other day, which was surprisingly, as I clicked on it, pretty well received. A lot better received than you would expect. So I'm going to go through a pretty brief list of what Matt talked about in this 48-minute video. Again, watch the video for yourself, come to your own conclusions. I do want to see where the accountability takes place, and let's see what they said. Now, the first half of Matt's video is a lot about the Lex situation. Matt says they could have handled the situation in a much better way, but he insisted that him and Ryan never took any action to cover up a sexual assault.
I also want to state that we never took any action to cover up a sexual assault, and we never tried to cover Dawn from any consequences. And I'll go into that more as we progress through the video. Despite our delayed action on this, I do want to state unequivocally that Ryan and I never made any attempts to cover up a sexual assault or to aid Dawn.
Matt flew Dawn to Florida after learning that Dawn and Lex broke up without knowing about the sexual assault that took place. place. Rav reached out to Matt about this, and then Lex finally told Matt on the phone, and Matt agrees that he should not have asked Lex what he should do in this scenario. It was very obvious what he should have done, and he decided to be passive about it. And yes, this is what caused a lot of the issues that Lex talked about in her video.
To be honest, I was terrified of misstepping in this situation due to its sensitive nature and how close it was to home. I was not sure how to navigate it. This was all new territory to me. And I asked her a really stupid question because of that. I asked Lex what she wanted me and Ryan to do about the situation, which was an absolutely dumbass thing to ask. I meant it from a place of, we want to help and we will do whatever it is you want us to do to make the situation better. I now see that obviously came across as me putting the responsibility of the situation back on the victim, because we did not take it as seriously right from the jump as we should have. Instead, we asked questions and tried to do some detective work and get to the bottom of it, and maybe have Dawn talk to Lex to try to figure out, if this was a misunderstanding, which I now see was an absolutely, terrible, terrible move, suggesting that.
He says that during this conversation with Lex, he did selfishly bring up how this would affect the channel, which is something he definitely didn't do, which means a lot of the comments about the magnum opus thing turned out to be pretty true. In the last video, we heard that Lex and Rav both separately said that Super Mega told Lex that since Don wasn't technically an employee and he was a contract worker, that they didn't have to fire him or do anything technically. Matt doesn't understand why he would say this. He basically chalked it up to miscommunication.
I don't see the logic in that or why I would have said that, because that's not something I would have said. I think it's more realistic that something was misinterpreted or miscommunicated there.
Honestly, I don't know how that miscommunication would happen or how Lex and Rav would say something that is that specific, but that really just is up to whose word you're going to trust. Matt says that him and Ryan had a conversation with Don, and Matt says that Don's story is much different than Lex's, and they should not have taken as much time as they did to look into the story, but they were afraid of misstepping in the situation with two people that they considered to be their friends.
We asked him what had happened that night, and he explained it from his perspective, which was very different from Lex's perspective. We felt a little confused on what had happened that night, as did Rav. Rav was also trying to figure out what had gone down. And at this point, I don't think any of us still were taking it as seriously as we should have been. And that is something that I sincerely regret, because we did not take it as seriously right from the jump as we should have.
In a lot of ways, I feel like it is very simple to just confront someone up front, especially if you're paying them and they're staying at your house. I think it's pretty fair to go, hey man, can you, confirm whether or not you did this very simple thing? And if it didn't happen, we need to figure out why, and we need to get you out of here. Matt then shows texts from Rav telling Matt that he has more context to what happened between Lex and Don, and the situation doesn't seem as serious as it did before.
Here you can see some text messages between myself and Rav, where Rav is saying that he figured out a little more context on the situation at one point. Rav did wisen up quicker than Ryan and I did, though. I think that he took it more seriously than we did. We were still confused and not sure what to do, and we messed up.
Now, this was before Lex's call with Matt, but Matt makes it clear that Rav ended up wising up and he took Lex's side on the situation before him and Ryan did. Matt reiterates that they did nothing at all to cover up a sexual assault, but he did say that Don's sexual assault is the reason that he left Super Mega and why they didn't answer questions from fans asking about where he had gone for like a year.
I do want to state unequivocally that Ryan and I never made any attempts to cover up a sexual assault or to aid Dawn. People have been theorizing and asking us for over a year, where did Dawn go? Why is Dawn no longer the channel artist? This is the reason. In response to what Lex told us, we removed Don as our channel artist and we cut contact with him 100%. Personal business, we have not had any communications. And we did not cover this up from other people.
It's hard for me to completely understand where they're coming from when they say they weren't trying to cover up a sexual assault, especially because two close friends of theirs, Justin and Kelly, both removed Super Mega from their Twitter bios. And according to Lex, it was after they found out about Don's situation. And of course, by Don's situation, I mean him sexually assaulting Lex. I struggle to understand how someone as close to them like Justin wouldn't know about someone in the Super Mega office as being a sexual assaulter, especially because Justin knew Don. In the other case, if you knew about Super Mega's controversy with another former employee of them by the name of Jackson, Lex says in her video that she knew all about the Jackson situation. She was with Matt when it happened, and it seems like their whole office was aware of that. It feels like not bringing up to the rest of your office that there is someone working amongst you who has sexually assaulted another person working amongst you, especially if all these people are friends with each other, then I just can't understand how they weren't trying to hide this from the people around them. But Matt's answer to that would be that they didn't tell other people or the public about this because Lex wanted the situation to be private and they didn't want to speak for her.
And she expressed that she did not want this to be a thing that was public. We felt like it was not our place to address someone else's sexual assault and give that as the reasoning for removing contact with Don. We figured that as long as he was gone and we weren't working with him, that was our response.
And as much as I understand trying to help Lex's privacy, Don is someone that you paid that stays in your office who knows your employees. This is also a work matter, that you have someone who has sexually assaulted one of your friends amongst you guys. And I still do not understand how all of that stayed between 3 people when the rest of this shit is leaking everywhere. It just doesn't really add up to me how something like this happens to a close friend of yours and that is your immediate response. Even if you ended up doing the right thing and you took the time, shouldn't we be worried about the fact that you didn't hear that a friend of yours sexually assaulted another friend of yours and immediately addressed it and kicked him out? I just don't really understand, even if Lex wanted it private, how it would be that are you guys just that busy that shit happens and it's like, oh, he's going to be here this time. I messed up the timing of everything and oops, someone had to run into the guy that sexually assaulted them because I had too much going on. If you have too much going on and you can't take care of that, you need to hire someone who can, or else you don't deserve your business. You don't know how to handle it. This isn't a question of whether or not they didn't know her intentions or whether or not everything was as serious as it was. This is a personal thing that is happening to friends of yours. This isn't like something on paper where you have to figure out how to find physical proof that something happened. I think I can never imagine that happening to a close friend of mine and having the power to do something about it, but kind of just waiting for the victim to take action rather than help her tell her story. But Matt does admit that they were cowardly in the scenario and they should have cut contact with Don immediately, but it took much longer than it should have. Matt says it was his fault that Don was around the Super Megaplex when Lex was there, and it was handled in the wrong way. He said that he was fed up with Don staying at his place after learning about what happened to Lex, but sent Don to the office to stay with Rav and forgot that he told Lex he would be gone.
Lex also brought up an instance where she went to go stay at the office and Don was there. This was a complete accident and misunderstanding on my end. It is completely my fault. I did not mean for that to happen, and I take full responsibility for that. I had been fed up with Dawn staying with me, especially after hearing what Lex had told me, and Lex had not arrived in town yet. At the time, I also had 2 or 3 people staying with me on top of Dawn, and I felt really overwhelmed. I had a lot going on in my personal life at the time that was stressing me out, and I felt overwhelmed.
This is going to be interesting for later in the story, how Matt immediately figures out a situation to home one of his friends, Don, after knowing what he did to Lex. But then down the line, when Lex and Rav literally don't have a home to go to, and the one place where they had all of their stuff was literally stolen from them, now we have all these comments from people online saying that Lex and Rav were just taking Super Mega for granted and they should have been happy that they could have stayed there those few days that they did. We'll get to that. It's a complete mess, but I think a lot of these stories about the homelessness part of Lex's story have been harshly discounted in this video, and shows a lot of instances in where Matt kind of completely goes over some of the things that Lex shows in her video, which I will get to in a second. But let's continue. Matt shows screenshots showing that he was kicking Don from the office after realizing that he told Lex that she could stay there. Matt says he felt like he was babysitting Don in a text that he shows, and that's why he sent him to the office where Lex ended up being. Again, Matt says that he recognizes where he failed and that he wants to take full accountability for it. Matt claims that the communication with Lex and Rav staying at the office was poor and that all four of them could have been more mature about the situation, but Ryan and Matt felt that the tensions were too high, so they didn't feel like having that conversation at the time.
All around, it was a pretty weird vibe, and I think all four of us could have acted more mature during that period, but we failed to communicate. And that is largely on myself and Ryan.
And this is another instance where I think a lot of people start to go, well, you know, they're just human. They're busy. They can't really figure out what's going on. But it still doesn't address the multiple days of communication that Lex didn't have with the guys when she needed to get into the place. And it also doesn't address the fact that these are real friends of yours who are in your city and like desperately need help. I don't know if we remember the story in Lex's video because suddenly people are saying that she tried to claim that Super Mega made her homeless or whatever. But no, Lex trusted a friend of hers, a close friend of hers that she trusted to take her situation in a way that was serious and took action, like a person who actually runs a business with a bunch of their fucking friends. But if you can't run a business with a bunch of people who are friends of yours, like we have seen time and time again, you hire these people in your group, you make them a part of your channel, and then suddenly one by one people are leaving and they all seem to just have bad things to say about it. Later in this video, I am going to show texts that Matt showed that do help his side, that do make it look like he was being more responsive, and I think those texts give us good context, but it continually pushes this narrative that because Leighton and Lex were nice to Matt and Ryan during this time where apparently they were miserable, that means that they were somehow lying about that thing. And I don't know if a lot of you are the same way, but I feel like when someone has the resources like Super Mega has to take care of people close to them, there is obviously a dynamic here in which Rav and Lex feel like they need to kiss up to Matt and Ryan. She even said it in her video that that's why she was being so nice, because she was desperate for a place and she thought she had a friend who could provide it to her, but she was more and more feeling like she was overstepping and more feeling like they wanted her out of the house. And just because they're nice over text doesn't mean that disproves what they said later, which is that it felt like they were one step away from being fully kicked out and having to move all the way back to where they went because a lot of unfortunate shit happened. And Matt and Ryan can even say themselves that they're human, they make mistakes, these things are all miscommunication. But then when it comes to people actually living in their house and needing shelter who they consider to be close friends, people are kind of treating it like this black and white situation where you can't let someone live in your space, even though everyone says it's completely trashed and it smells disgusting. And you guys are like going into work and not talking to them somehow. But at the same time, you're upset with them staying. It's just, I understand that they take accountability for a lot of that, and I do appreciate that. But I think this more and more goes to show that Matt and Ryan aren't really fit to be in this kind of position where they're housing multiple friends at Matt's house and at this office, and they somehow still have Don here and he's mixing in with everybody else. People keep saying that this situation has been pushed completely on Matt and Ryan and that it's not even about the original thing anymore. We should be focused on Don. But people keep forgetting that they are agreeing that they did all this horrible shit. And just because they agreed that they did it because there was proof that they did it, that doesn't mean that suddenly everyone was lying about everything. Matt goes on to say that in Lex's video, she explains that Matt and Ryan gave her and Rav a cold shoulder, and it sort of felt like they were being constantly nudged to get out of there, with Jim constantly texting them about these vacations that they were taking when Lex had to go back home to her mom because her dog was sick. And suddenly it's like, oh, you and Rav are taking another vacation, even though you're driving across the country in your Jeep with everything you own just to come to California and have it stolen from you. I don't understand how this isn't a severe enough situation where you need to sit down with these people who are close to you and give them a talk about how you can support them in that time. But if you're going to support all these other people staying at your house for all these different reasons, don't you think being completely homeless and having all your personal belongings stolen from you is a big enough reason to allow people to like stay until they get the help they need? Because if not, then these people aren't as close to you as you think they are, and you need to not open yourselves up to being an option for people to come and stay at your place when serious shit happens, and then suddenly you don't want to support them anymore. Matt shows texts responding to this tension where he said that the only reason they were ignoring Lex and Rav is because they spaced out and they were wrapped up in their own worlds. Jim was hired to communicate for them, so that's why Jim talks to Lex and Rav about leaving the office, and Matt and Ryan just sat in the group chat and let Jim talk for them. They said that because they were staying at the office when all of this happened, this became a work issue and not a personal issue with them. So because personal friends of them became homeless, but the building that you let them stay at was an office and not a house, that means that you need to deal with this in a work manner and kick them out. I don't think that makes sense, especially because you're letting them stay between your house and the office, and because you do business with all your friends. If you do business with your friends and they're all a part of your channel and they're a part of the culture and the work culture you build, you don't even have an HR department because everyone's friends, then that means that this isn't a work issue anymore. It is a personal issue because your personal lives are a part of this office. If your office is a place that is holding friends of yours and people are living out of that space, then yeah, it's personal. They're your friends. We don't deal with it like a work matter just because it happened in a fucking building that was where you work. Matt claims that Jim was better at communicating these things than they were, so they put Jim in a group chat with them to settle it, but obviously, from Lex's point of view, it's pretty intimidating to have the two guys just sitting in a group chat who decide whether or not you're going to live there without them even saying anything, and having Jim call you needing to handle other personal things in your life as like vacations. The more and more I hear these parts of the story, the more and more it feels like they are missing a lot of the details that does make this more nuanced, like Matt said.
Overall, I would like for people to understand that this situation is not entirely black and white. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of personal feelings involved on all sides.
And I think we need to look at that from the other side too. Just because the guy who is holding those people at his house is suddenly saying that Jim was hired to be the guy that needs to kick out their friends when they stay too long. No, I don't like that excuse. I don't feel like that's a very good excuse, but we'll keep going. Matt says that Lex and Rav voluntarily left the office and showed a text from them saying that they were leaving and apologizing for their long stay. Now, again, I don't really think that this is good proof that there isn't any tension, because obviously with Lex showing just how much she was going through at the time, the fact that they might be the only people who can actually take care of them until they can find a place to settle down, of course, they're going to be nice about it. That's a normal trauma response to have to something like this that happened to her. To have this sexual assault happen and go about it the way it did, that affects someone. And I think the fact that they didn't only see that they messed up there, but feel like they didn't mess up from, removing Lex and Rav from their home, I find that hard to believe. Lex repeatedly says in the video that the trauma response she had through this whole experience is what scared her from putting her foot down and asking for their help in the first place, because she genuinely didn't feel like Ryan and Matt were trying to help her out.
You know how there's fight, flight, or fawn? I think I did fawn. I'm looking this up. I don't want to fuck this up. Fawn, people pleaser, lack of identity, no boundaries, overwhelmed, codependent. Yep. So I was doing that overtime. That whole stay at Matt's was a lot.
Even Matt says in this video that it's not about the intention. It's about the way that Lex feels about the whole thing. And even after confronting them about it, it obviously did not make her feel welcomed.
I wasn't sure how to talk about this type of situation. And I believe that some of the things that I said to Lex on this call came across very differently from what I intended. But I do know that intent does not change how it was interpreted and how Lex felt about it.
Matt can show as many texts as he wants between him and Lex showing that they were friendly and that they're really close friends, but all I see is that someone you were really close friends with tried to make things right with you and give you the benefit of the doubt, but she walked away feeling like she couldn't even tell her story in a comfortable way to you guys. Matt says that him and Rav talked months later about it, and they agreed that everyone was in a bad place last summer, and that they made up about it.
After they left, things did seem tense for a little bit, but they seemed to subside. I rekindled things with Rav several months later. We spoke about the last summer and how we were all in bad places and it was awkward. Rav and I, apologized to each other and made up. We did this at my house as well as a little discussion at Creator Clash 2023, which again is why I found myself very confused when Rav said what he did on Twitter recently.
Matt says because of the texts he had between Lex, he thought everything was okay and that him and Lex were fine, but insinuates that, and this is where the video changes a lot, Matt insinuates that things seemed to change between him and Lex once Matt and Ryan fired Leighton as their merch designer.
And since last summer, I assumed that my relationship with Lex was much better. For example, here's several texts I received from Lex between November of last year and February of this year. I thought that after I apologized to her last July, things had smoothed out, and I think you could see why I would think that. But that communication ceased around the time that we fired Leighton, who is a close friend of hers.
A big part about this video that Matt and Ryan were very upset about is the comments that Leighton made about Daniel and his suicide and the way that Matt and Ryan handle it.
And if you've dealt with suicide, you know that grief is different for each person, and you know that there are a lot of complex and confusing emotions that come with the grief regarding suicide. Some of those include anger, and if I ever expressed that to Lex, which again I firmly believe that I did not, if that's the case, then I find it wildly inappropriate that Lex would use something I said in a very vulnerable state to weaponize and to make me look worse.
Of course, I see how Matt and Ryan would respond to this in a negative way if it's not true. But in the same way, Matt brings up these details about his personal relationship that were brought up in this situation. And it's another thing that he was pretty upset about in terms of people dragging in other people into his life that have nothing to do with this.
And I don't think it was appropriate or necessary to drag both my current girlfriend and my ex-girlfriends into the line of fire. They are both being harassed viciously, and their personal lives are being used as weapons to make me look worse. And I think that's completely unacceptable.
And although I do think that there were a lot of instances that were unnecessary to bring up about you, in the same way, your life is so connected. I mean, you say it yourself that Super Mega is your magnum opus. It is a part of you. Your personal life is a part of this channel. And when your audience feels like you led them on to be a different person than you actually are, that is a part of your job, as sad as it is. Matt largely includes a lot of his personal life in his content, and even if he keeps one thing private, I feel like when a former friend of yours comes forward about sexual assault that happened under your home, behind closed doors, you shouldn't be saying that Matt's going to be debunking everything and that he's going to prove everyone wrong. We're all going to feel like fucking idiots. I think that's pretty necessary context that your own girlfriend is calling all the people who believe in this girl's story like dumb as shit because you're here to like disprove it all. And yes, a lot of this situation has a lot of nuance, has conversations between people that from our point of view we're never going to hear. I am not surprised that they came forward and they don't feel the same way Lex did. Of course they don't feel the same way Lex did about the whole situation, or they would have done something right. But that's our main issue, is that any of this happened in the first place. Of course this whole thing is pretty messy, but I think we should kind of move past all of the relationship stuff. Matt does talk about a lot of the romantic things that happened between him and Morg Pie, who was the person who had a stream about her very short like hookup thing with Matt. And I think that's another thing that he covers in the video that I also think we should just maybe not focus on as much as the main story. But the reason it matters is because when Matt concluded this part of the video, when he said that Morg Pie and him just had some very big misunderstandings on where they were in terms of the sexual part of their very short relationship. The important thing is that Matt explains that this happened, and this stream by Morg Pie happened after she became friends with Leighton, basically insinuating that Leighton being fired was a turning point in Lex and Morg Pie coming forward with both of their stories. And this is kind of the turning point where a lot of people's perceptions shifted of Super Mega from initially when Lex put out her video till when Matt put out his response.
Following when I had that text conversation with Morgan in June where we smoothed things over, Morgan began hanging out with our ex-employee Leighton more, and I have not heard from her since that conversation until I saw her stream.
And this revolves around their ex-merch designer Leighton, who had a pretty long stream the other day and made a lot of claims and accusations against Super Mega that weren't really initially talked about in Lex's video. This part of the video largely refutes a lot of what Leighton was saying, and I think it resulted in people shifting a lot more of the blame to the victims of this situation rather than the people who caused it in the first place. Again, I don't have a connection to Leighton. I have friends who are friends with him, but I don't really know. It claims a lot about a person if you think that they're talking about their experience with you just because like one of your former employees who got fired like months ago is like orchestrating all of them to come after you. And I do think that Matt says some things about Leighton in here that don't make him look great about the situation. I don't think he should have said anything in the first place, and I do regret talking about it because it has become this conversation over whether or not Leighton was like the mastermind behind this thing, and insinuating that both of the women in this story are coming forward only because they're friends of this guy who hates them. Leighton can talk shit and lie about you guys as much as he wants, but I think it's kind of insane to think that that was the turning point for Lex to speak out about her getting sexually assaulted in your house, especially because she's being harassed endlessly and she's not even a YouTuber and had to put a video out on a channel that didn't even have anybody there to watch in the first place. And I do want to clarify here that when I say the turning point for Lex to tell her story, I very well think that Leighton could have convinced Lex and given her the courage to step up and say something. But I definitely don't think that everything was good between Lex and SuperMega, and then once she became friends with Leighton, all of the sudden she has 2.5 hours worth of stories about how they made her uncomfortable and how they treated her. I mean, I don't think he can support Lex's story and really make this claim at the same time, because in order for this to be true, it would have to mean that Lex made up or exaggerated the way she felt about SuperMega and their way of handling the situation. According to them, she was very valid in most of the points that she made. Anyways, I'm going to talk about what Matt brings up about Leighton, and talk about what I think about it and where some of these missteps may have happened, because while I think that the YouTube comments are pretty gross on all the videos, I mean literally, like, one of the top comments on their video is like, can we please just talk about the fact that they're all attacking Matt and Ryan so hard, no one's attacking Don for sexually assaulting someone? That usually happens when the people who are watching over all of this have the biggest platform. They're the only ones that are tying this whole thing together. None of this would have really happened if she was not put in that position. So Matt says that since Leighton was fired in March, he has been on a vindictive campaign to deplatform them and ruin their image. Matt shows text from Leighton showing that he was sorry about mistakes that he was making in the company and that he was ready to leave SuperMega because he felt like he couldn't handle the job. Matt and Ryan ended up letting Leighton go, but originally he was even thinking about leaving himself. Matt heard from sources that Leighton said that if things went south with him and SuperMega, he could easily get them canceled, but when they brought this up to Leighton, he swore he didn't say any of that. Matt said that Leighton was all in on all the jokes they were making about him. He even encouraged them up until the point he was fired. Matt shows a lot of text from Leighton showing that he was fully comfortable with the jokes, and that he didn't blame Matt and Ryan for any of it. And although I do believe that there is a very obvious dynamic, if you have your boss above you, telling these jokes, even if they do ask you if you're okay with it, it's obvious that Leighton was in a weird position with SuperMega where he constantly felt like he was on like the brim of being fired. So I do think in that case, there's a lot of ways where he could be sending them positive texts to make sure that they don't get rid of him. But at the same time, that doesn't really fall on SuperMega as much as it falls on Leighton for properly communicating that he wasn't uncomfortable with these pretty disgusting jokes everyone was making. At the same time, I think that there were some major cues that were missed by Leighton, and when him and SuperMega split, there was definitely a lot of tension there that turned into something that it really shouldn't have. I think everyone is, of course, valid to be able to tell their story about the situation, but I think because he was someone who was close to Lex, he should have taken that time to really raise her story up, and instead he made a lot of claims that Matt was able to refute in this video, and that in turn made Lex look not so great anymore to a lot of people. Lex said herself publicly that she was upset with Leighton for a lot of the remarks he made, and I'm gonna assume at this point that Leighton isn't going to really speak more on SuperMega because it doesn't really seem like his head was in the right place when he started talking about it, and it kind of frustrates me that it took so much away from Lex's story, and now it seems like the subreddit and comments are crawling with people who think that just because someone who was a previous friend of SuperMega's obviously is going to be able to connect with another person who had bad experiences, suddenly it means that the guy who had a bad experience with you is like brainwashing everyone else in this vindictive campaign that's like out to get you. And I don't understand why someone as big as Morgpie and someone like Lex would ever want to come forward about something that they didn't truly feel was necessary to come forward with. Not everything is as simple as telling someone that everything's okay, and there was obviously something going on in the office that raised a lot of tensions and caused something like this to get as big as it did. Matt shows texts on a random Discord server where Leighton and other members were attempting to find ways to cancel SuperMega, And Matt basically claims that all of this happened because Leighton and these Discord users were trying to figure out a way to ruin his career. He has screenshots. I don't even know from what. They're just like random Discord screenshots, but he is claiming that there has been a group of people that Leighton has worked with to try and organize the best time to speak up about their feelings on the channel or whatever.
I later received anonymous screenshots that were leaked from a Discord server that's just dedicated to hating on SuperMega, the members of which created and spread horrible lies about my ex-girlfriend on Tumblr. They have harassed me for years. Some of them also write underage sexual assault fan fiction. These screenshots detailed the exact situation Leighton was in with his employer. That's how I knew that they were real, because I knew about this agreement.
And Matt also scrolls through these screenshots in a thread on his Gmail that says Leighton evidence thread, which at least makes it clear to me that they kind of foresaw Leighton coming forward about this stuff and had a lot of this prepared, had a lot of these screenshots and stories prepared to make sure that Leighton can't deface them. And while I don't have evidence on the other side for this, I just want to at least put the information out there so you guys can see it. I think Matt covers a lot more in his response video. I think it's smart to watch that to really make sure you see the whole thing. But yeah, Matt even brings up tweets from Ethan claiming that SuperMega would say slurs behind closed doors, and claimed that Ethan has really only been with them a few times and that Lex is a person of color and why would they use slurs around her.
Shortly after, one of Leighton's best friends, who is Lex's boyfriend, tried to instigate drama on Twitter by lying and saying that he has heard us say the N-word multiple times. In reality, we've only met this individual a handful of times, and it's mostly been at social events and always accompanied by Lex. So to think that we would just casually be dropping the N-word with a hard R in front of not only someone who's a stranger, but also a woman of color, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I don't really see why in a story that you otherwise think is true, Lex would suddenly lie about these things that are very serious. Again, I would watch the video for yourselves and see where you fall in it, but a lot of this stuff just ends up being personal shit that we can't really prove, and it's not going to hold as much weight because of that. But I'll continue. Matt says that Leighton's campaign trying to ruin their career became downright creepy and obsessive. He clarifies that he is not saying that Leighton convinced Lex to come forward. He is not saying that this is some methodical move by Leighton, but he does say multiple times that all of this just happened after they fired Leighton, and that he's very sure that this is the reason why she came forward.
Leighton would frequently slander myself and Ryan to fans on his Discord server. He even went as far as to join a fan's 18-year-old birthday drunken Twitter space to shit talk us. This stuff was creeping us out. He was obsessed with us and wouldn't leave us alone. And at this point, we were fully expecting more of Leighton's close friends to eventually speak out about us for one reason or another. And now a lot of them have.
I did want to include a little more of this part because I feel like I missed a lot of the claims Matt was making and a lot of the things he was refuting. But basically, he has a couple parts in this video where he talks about things that Ethan said that he outright denies, along with some things that Leighton did to spite SuperMega that really kind of put Matt and Ryan on edge in the first place, and gave us a little bit of an explanation of how someone like Leighton would leave SuperMega with such a bad taste in his mouth, which doesn't excuse how it was affected or how it was heard by other people, but I don't know if this is a strong point for Leighton's case. I don't know. There is a lot of claims that were being thrown that way, so I can see how he would see that Leighton was, throwing a bunch of stuff at them and getting in the way of Lex's story. But I think there was a better way of them to tackle this, to, claim that their communication with Leighton was way different than he claimed, while at the same time pushing up Lex's story, because it's like they keep saying most of the stuff Lex said was true, but then they go around and keep saying that this vindictive campaign only began once we fired Leighton. But if these things happened to Lex anyways, and you think you should have done better, then I do feel like that's the bottom line. But then again, you do have the right to turn around and refute that, and I do think Matt went as far as he could to refute a lot of the things Leighton said.
Leighton wasted no time to go to Twitter to make her story about himself and to jump on the opportunity to air out his personal grievances with us. People on Twitter even noticed this and they were quick to call it out. He finally had the freedom to exaggerate, misrepresent, and flat out lie about myself, Ryan, our friends, our partners, and our company. He did a 3-hour stream, so I'm not going to go into every point, obviously. It seems that he tried to throw anything and everything he possibly could think of at the wall to see what would stick. I think that's pretty obvious and telling of his true motive here.
Again, even though I am friends with Ethan and Lex, I don't know really anything about what happened with Leighton here, but I don't really touch on this as much as I want to in the video, so I'll say it now. I think Leighton made a very big mistake making the stream he did and talking about his experience at the time that he did. I personally don't trust his word. I wouldn't be surprised if Lex felt the same way. And although that doesn't change any of my feelings on her personal story, I do think it was a necessary thing for Matt to bring up just because of how many different accusations Leighton was talking about. I do think because of how many different things Leighton said without much care during his stream, Lex's story was suddenly overshadowed by a lot of claims Leighton was making that Matt was very easily able to dismantle, and I think that may have been the biggest mistake in this whole situation. I know that Lex does not feel good about how it went from her perspective. Even though she is a friend of Leighton's, I know that she was surprised and pretty upset at the way that he handled the situation. Again, there is that power imbalance there, but there's no way of us knowing if that was a real tension on the relationship. Matt claims that Leighton tried to throw everything he possibly could at the wall after Lex's video. He shows texts that show Leighton complaining himself in group chats about Rav and Lex staying at the Super Megaplex for too long. One of the bigger things was that Matt outright completely denies that they have ever said the N-word, I guess at least in the past few years since Super Mega began, and they said that Leighton's claims about his relationship were largely overstated, and he does admit to making a mistake and being unfaithful in his last relationship and cheating on his ex, but not to the extent that Leighton shared. He said that a lot of what Leighton said about his relationship was outright false.
Another huge accusation that he made is that we love to toss around the N-word. I'll admit we make crude jokes behind the scenes, obviously, but we would never drop the N-word. I know our past on YouTube is more questionable in 2016 to 2017, 2018, during that time period, and I know that a lot of the jokes we made were very questionable and offensive, but now pushing 30, we have grown a lot and know that that is not acceptable, and that word is never being used between us in any context. To state otherwise is a flat-out dishonest lie, and it's a low-hanging attempt to make us look bad because honestly, it's really easy. You don't need any proof. You can just say that we said the N-word.
Especially when it comes to Matt's personal relationships and a lot of the things Leighton was saying that they did behind closed doors. I do feel like Leighton doing a stream that is that long and includes so many claims, it really ends up building this big cloud that kind of just covers up what Lex was trying to say in her original video. And I felt like Lex was very well spoken and put details together in a very succinct and like respectable way. And I don't know, it does frustrate me a little bit that we aren't able to have this conversation specifically about the claims Lex made in her video because Matt and Ryan had to encapsulate all of them into one video. I can't blame that on one person. This is, you know, a big shitstorm, but it made it a lot harder for everyone to understand where they all are in this situation. This is when Matt comes to the point that Leighton's close friends are capitalizing off of Lex's story, which I think is just outright untrue. Lex wanted her story to be told, and I think that some people may have made it harder for that story to be told because of them coming out, but I think it takes a step too far when you are just like outright claiming that all of these people are doing this because Leighton doesn't like you guys.
A lot of people, mainly Leighton and his close friends, have used this as an opportunity to capitalize off of what was initially someone's story of sexual assault. It seems like the story lost its plot and quickly devolved into a dogpile on me and Ryan, when I don't think we necessarily were the focus to begin with, because it was about an assault.
Well, I don't know. I wish that I didn't have to be talking about my friend's sexual assault right now, but I do, because apparently I'm capitalizing off of it because your ex-merch guy told me to. Matt says that people are going to continue to lie about them because, you know, this is the internet.
I anticipate many more people online will continue to do this because that's the internet. And that's what it is.
And Matt gives a big apology for other people being unfairly brought into this, which kind of brought us to the conclusion of his video. Ryan's response was a lot shorter. He very quickly agreed that he made a lot of mistakes after Don did what he did.
We selfishly waited until we felt comfortable to have this discussion with Don instead of having the victims back immediately.
He kind of echoes the same sentiment as Matt, so I think, you know, it was okay that his video was as small as it was because they kind of would have been repeating a lot of the same stuff. Ryan apologizes for sexting fans in the position that he's in, which was something that was brought up with this whole story in the past couple weeks, and says that he made a massive mistake on that regard.
I abused my position and my power for selfish self-indulgence. I know that there is no sorry to rectify the damage I've done with this, and not because of how it's affecting me right now, because I deserve this. What I did is inexcusable and inappropriate. I'm not sorry because of how this is all affecting me in this current time. I'm sorry for how this has affected everyone that was within the vicinity of this situation.
And then finally, he mainly talks about Leighton's comments. Once again, Leighton made a lot of comments about the way that Ryan and Matt treated their own friend's suicide, and he makes it very clear that this is unequivocally untrue and that neither of them would ever make comments about this. It definitely was something that both of them focused on in the video that really upset them, and I do think that those constant comments about that definitely made it harder for people to fully hear everyone's stories. And I think that's what is so frustrating for so many people in this story, is that it feels like there were a lot of little things that kind of built up, and because they were able to dismantle and give more understanding to a couple of those things, I feel like we kind of massively overshadowed a lot of what Lex was saying in the original video.
I have done enough shit to tarnish my image, but I will not stand by and let someone talk lies about the way I talked or treated my trauma in regards to Daniel. The sole focus of all of this should have been about the support that Lex needed.
Now, I do want to give a conclusion to how I feel about both of these responses. I do think that Matt and Ryan own up to a lot of the truly awful shit they did, and I think that was good. I also think there were a lot of instances where there was heavy miscommunication, and I do feel like a lot of the receipts they brought to the table make it easier to understand where they're coming from, while also understanding that this was handled very poorly, and most people in their shoes would have handled it much differently. Luckily, there's a lot of times where they do just outright admit that they fucked up. And I do think that their issues with Leighton were handled poorly on all sides, and I think that Leighton should not have spoke up as soon as he did about his experience. I never want to hold someone back from being able to talk about how they were felt in a certain situation, but specifically because it happened so quickly after Lex's video, and especially because his stream was so much longer and there were so many little claims made, I feel like he may have had a lot of emotions and held up resentment from how much he was experiencing while working for Matt and Ryan for a couple years. And I think when Lex was finally able to be heard, he was ready to tell his story, and he may have overstepped in that specific moment in time. I wish Super Mega just had the chance to respond to just Lex and her story, but even with all of the things they admit in the first half of the video, a part of Super Mega's fan base is relentlessly claiming that Matt and Ryan were just defaced by one disgruntled employee who had a vendetta to cancel them. And while I think that they do have evidence to show that Leighton overstepped in terms of how he followed up Lex's video, and if I was Lex, I would understandably be very, very upset. But I think boiling down any of what she says in her story to just being controlled by Leighton is pretty disgusting and untrue. None of this should have a massive effect on what Super Mega did and what they even admitted to doing in this video. Despite how many times Matt can say he messed up, this video insinuates strongly that Lex would not have stepped forward if it were not for Leighton, and that all of these people, including myself, have bought into this agenda that we need to take down Super Mega because the merch designer that you fired told us to.
I'm asking that people use their common sense and maybe take a step back and look at the big picture here. And I hope that people can see that there is a personal vendetta that is being blown up here.
And I do see how the people watching Matt's video can draw that conclusion when all of these stories are told by Matt in a way that feel like conspiratorial to him. But when so many different people are upset about shit you've done or said in the past to an extent where they'll ruin their career over it because they try to put out these videos and now they're being swarmed with hate, you'd think that if all of these people would come forward and put themselves in the spotlight in this way, maybe that's something that you need to reflect on yourself about. And I think Matt displays this reflection in the first half of the video, but as he talks about the role that Leighton plays in this whole thing, I don't understand why his actions have to discredit the original story. Lex even said publicly that she was upset about the way Leighton handled the story, and she was not under the impression that her story was going to cause him to say everything he did. None of those mistakes should have fallen on Lex. Why would Lex go out of her way to risk her career with thousands of people harassing her for, again, Super Mega's merch designer guy? We have confirmed from several people, including Don, that yes, Don sexually assaulted Lex and Matt and Ryan kept him around. But then Lex doesn't tell her story until she meets Leighton, and then suddenly Leighton gets fired and convinces her to make a 2-hour and 20-minute video telling her story. It's hard to wrap my head around why people would use Leighton's false judgment and personal grudge against Lex as if she didn't also provide proof for things Super Mega said that were never actually addressed in either of their response videos. Like one of the bigger texts that Lex showed where she asked Matt about Don claiming that Super Mega fired him without much of a reason, only to receive a text from Matt that didn't seem worried. He just said, "Be gone, foul beast," even though one of their ex-employees was lying to people about why he was fired and still talking to fans about it. I think that's insane to me. And it could really only either be Don lying to people about this so he doesn't have to admit what he did, or maybe the talk he had with Super Mega was confusing and vague to him. But we really never got any response about that.
I felt them downplaying it in real time, but I was across the state, like 5 hours away, and could do nothing about it. So that's when I decided I needed to be there. Matt had known since, or at least I told him, May 25th that I would be in town on the 14th. On the 13th at 9 p.m., he messages me this: "Hey, can't wait to see ya. Just an update. Dawn is staying at the office with Rav right now." I did not know what the fuck to say, so all I could say is, "What should I do?" "Oh, whatever you want. I was just updating you where Dawn was. My place is full at the moment, unfortunately." Texting me hours before I gotta be there that he just sent him to the place I'm staying at. He didn't have to do this. Found out he did this because he was tired of Don making a mess.
They don't even touch on the fact that Ryan liked art from Don after they fired him on Twitter, and Don tweeted out asking people for a place to stay when none of Super Mega's fans knew that he sexually assaulted someone else. I'm all for keeping Lex's story private if she wants it to be private, but there's got to be a way to tell your fans in a safe way that Don is not someone who they should follow anymore, that he was let go for a reason that you can't talk about, but you need them to know that it's serious and that they shouldn't really engage with him anymore. I know this video does a lot of jumping back and forth, but that's what happens when we're looking at all these stories. But I do want to reflect on my original video and say that I do think I made a bit of a mistake, including Morgue Pie and Leighton's stories in that particular video. I wanted my video only to be about Lex's story, and I got caught up in context that I personally thought was important and necessary for the story. But I really should have only touched on Lex's video from the start and what happened with her and Don and Matt and Ryan specifically, since that was my goal in the beginning of the video. You know, despite that, I've still received several comments on the original video claiming that I put out my video about Lex without waiting for Super Mega to respond and that I was taking a side before hearing everybody's sides. And I thought I made this clear before, but of course, I'm going to take the side of a personal friend of mine when she comes out with a story about her own sexual assault. This isn't like an online, like normal thing where I look at all the facts and I make a decision. No, My friend was assaulted and never felt like she was able to be heard. And obviously, I believe her word. There is no way where I would look at that situation and hear her story and do people think that just legitimately she just wants to outright lie about the way they treated her for no reason? I don't really understand where people are coming from when they call me a liar with an agenda and they call her a liar with an agenda. Where do you guys think we're coming from? You think we're like a part of the Illuminati or something? I think my conclusion to this is that Super Mega made some very rough mistakes in the past couple of years, and it seems like there was a lot of carelessness that snowballed into a problem that got too big for them to handle very quickly. At the very best, these aren't evil guys. They're just really, really dumb, and they don't really deserve to have the company and the team and the platform that they have with the way that they've handled it, especially because of the way they handled Don and how they put several people in unforgivable circumstances, including many people who worked for them. They dropped the ball on people that they were supposedly like friends of, people that they supposedly cared for. I think it's sad any of this happened. I hope everyone takes some time away from the internet to think about how situations like these boil over and become as messy as they do once someone puts out a response and people just decide to like hound the person who decided and was brave enough to put out her story in the first place. Now she has to read comments every day of people telling her that she's wrong and that she lied about the whole thing and that Leighton controlled her to do it. And I think that's it. That's probably the last time I'll cover this story. I don't know. I feel like, you know, this shit isn't ever fun. I don't look forward to making videos like this, and it sucks that someone can talk for 48 minutes about their side of the story and then claim that people like me are trying to capitalize off of a sexual assault victim. So hopefully they both take some reflection and just maybe leave for a second. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Remember, watch the videos I linked down below. Look at the story for yourself. Tell me how you feel in the comments. Thanks for watching.